The forest was silent. Not the kind of peaceful silence you find on a calm morning, but the kind that makes your heart pound because you know someone is watching. It was November 1944, deep in the Hürtgen forest. Cold, damp, and dark. The perfect hunting ground for snipers. Private Karl Meyer of the German army lay perfectly still behind his scope. He'd been waiting for hours, hidden beneath wet leaves, scanning for the faintest movement. Somewhere out there, he knew, American infantry were moving through the trees, loud, careless, easy targets. Then, he saw it. A flicker of light, a helmet catching the weak sun. Karl's finger tightened on the trigger. He exhaled slowly, but before he could fire, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. A split second later, his scope exploded in a burst of glass and blood. Karl Meyer never saw the man who killed him. From 200 yards away, an American rifleman lowered his Springfield M1903A4 and whispered to his spotter, "You thought you were the hunter. But today, we're the ones doing the hunting." That day marked a shift few in the Wehrmacht were ready to accept the moment German snipers realized that American rifles, once mocked as crude and mass-produced, had become so precise, so deadly accurate, that even the best German marksmen weren't safe anymore. Because behind every trigger was not just a soldier but a nation that had learned how to manufacture accuracy. Before the Americans closed in on Europe, the title of deadliest marksman belonged unquestionably to the Germans. The Wehrmacht had turned sniping into an art form patient, methodical, and merciless. From the frozen streets of Stalingrad to the hedgerows of Normandy, German snipers shaped the battlefield with fear itself. One shot, one kill, and a dozen men frozen in terror, afraid to even raise their heads. Their weapon of choice was the carabiner, 98K. A bolt-action masterpiece descended from the Mauser family. Chambered in 7.9 2 x 57 millimeters, it was powerful, precise, and built with an engineer's obsession for perfection. Each rifle was hand-assembled, carefully inspected, and paired with a ZF-39 or Zeiss scope instruments, so refined they could track a man's breath from 600 yards. The best snipers could read wind like poets read silence. They'd lie still for hours, even days, waiting for that one perfect shot. A single man with a Mauser could halt an entire American platoon. And that's not an exaggeration. Reports from Allied soldiers during the Italian and Eastern Front campaigns describe the same chilling scenes. A sudden, clean shot, a man drops, and then, nothing. No sound, no clue where it came from. One American officer later recalled, "We feared the silence more than the bullets. Because when you didn't hear anything, that's when you knew the sniper was watching." By 1943, the German army had elevated snipers to near-mythic status. They were trained at specialized schools, given advanced camouflage, and treated as precision instruments of war. For years, the balance was one-sided. The Germans had the optics, the rifles, and the training. The Americans didn't. When U.S. troops first landed in North Africa and later Italy, their doctrine prioritized firepower over finesse. They relied on automatic weapons and sheer volume of fire to suppress the enemy, not surgical precision. To a German sniper, American soldiers were noisy, impatient, and easy prey. The Wehrmacht saw them as brash amateurs, strong, brave, yes, but clumsy. And for a while, they were right. Every battle report from 1942 and early 1943 told the same story. The Germans ruled the long-range game. They could snipe from church towers, tree lines, or factory windows, disappearing before anyone could locate them. But then came 1944, and something began to change. When American forces stormed Normandy and pushed inland, German sharpshooters expected another easy hunt. But the targets they once toyed with suddenly started shooting back. And not just with wild bursts of automatic fire, but with calm, calculated, terrifying accuracy. The first German officers to notice this shift thought it was coincidence, a few lucky shots from a few lucky men. But as the weeks went on, the reports piled up. Snipers experienced, well camouflaged, Sometimes veterans from the Eastern Front were being picked off from distances the Americans were not supposed to be capable of. The hunter had become the hunted. In the early years of the war, American doctrine didn't believe in the sniper. U.S. commanders preferred the brute force of artillery, the suppressive fire of machine guns, and the overwhelming rhythm of logistics. To them, a lone rifleman hiding in the woods was an anachronism, a relic of the past. But that illusion shattered in the hills of Italy. There, American patrols were cut down one by invisible marksmen. The enemy wasn't seen, only felt through the sudden loss of a friend, a scream echoing through the olive groves, and the paralyzing fear of stepping into an open field. Reports flowed back from the front. Our men are being hunted. We can't see where it's coming from. The army realized that brute force meant nothing if fear froze men in place. It wasn't enough to shoot more bullets, they had to shoot better ones. So the United States began a transformation that would stun the German high command. At Springfield Armory and Winchester, engineers started fine-tuning two rifles that would redefine the American soldier. 1. The M1 Garand, the People's Rifle. General George S. Patton once called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. Semi-automatic, gas-operated, chambered in. 30-06. Springfield, it fired 8 rounds in seconds, each one as steady as the last. For the first time in history, a standard-issue infantryman could put accurate fire on a target faster than any bolt-action rifle in the world. The Germans, with their beloved Mauser 98K, had to manually cycle each shot. Americans? They just squeezed the trigger again. The M1 wasn't just faster, it was forgiving. Its design absorbed recoil, allowing soldiers to stay on target even under stress. And when fitted with optics, it became something unexpected, a semi-automatic sniper's dream. 2. The Springfield M1 903 a 4, the Eyes of the Eagle. Derived from an older World War I design, the 1903 a 4 was reborn with new purpose. A long, heavy barrel gave it stability. Its bolt action was smooth, almost surgical. Fitted with an M73B1 scope, it could hit targets beyond 800 yards, matching the German Mauser in range, and sometimes surpassing it in precision. The secret? The 30-06 round. It was flatter, faster, and carried more energy downrange than the German 7.92 millimeters. At long distances, it punched through cover that Mauser bullets couldn't. But hardware was only half the equation. Back home, the U.S. began searching for men who already understood precision. Hunters from Montana, farmers from Kentucky, competitive shooters from small-town fairs, Americans who had grown up with a rifle in their hands and patience in their bones. The Army didn't just want soldiers. It wanted craftsmen of accuracy. By the time the Allies landed in Normandy, America had quietly built a new kind of soldier, calm under fire, invisible in the woods, deadly at range. And soon, the Germans would meet them face to face. The first real test came in the summer of 1944. After the beaches of Normandy were secured, American troops pushed into the tangled bocage, a maze of hedgerows, stone walls, and dense vegetation that swallowed entire companies. For the Germans, it was paradise. For months, they had used the bocage to perfection, ambushes, traps, and snipers in every shadow. But something changed. German sharpshooters began reporting something they'd never seen before. American riflemen who moved differently, who waited patiently, who fired only once. And when they fired, they didn't miss. One Wehrmacht sniper near St. Lo described it in his diary. I saw an American patrol 4 men. I took aim at the one carrying the radio. But before I could fire, there was a flash from the trees. My spotter fell, shot clean through the eye. The rest vanished like smoke. It was the same story across Normandy, Belgium, and later in the forests of Germany. The Americans had turned the tables. In the ruined villages of France, the crack of the M1 903 became a sound the Germans learned to fear. Unlike the Mauser, which required a deliberate pause between shots, the Garand's semi-automatic rhythm, allowed a trained marksman to adjust and fire again in less than a heartbeat. Pop, pop, pop. 3 rounds. 3 bodies down. To the Germans, it felt like facing multiple snipers at once. What confused them most wasn't just the accuracy, it was the consistency. Every American rifle seemed to shoot straight. Every squad had someone who could hit a helmet-sized target at 400 yards. To the Germans, this was unthinkable. Their own sniper rifles were hand-selected, tuned individually by gunsmiths. Only a handful in each unit were that precise. But the Americans had done something different, something terrifying. They had made precision a commodity. They had industrialized accuracy. A German officer later wrote, "We trained snipers. They trained an army of riflemen who could shoot like snipers." From the hedgerows of Normandy to the misty forests of the Ardennes, the legend of German marksmanship was fading, and with every trigger pulled by an American rifleman, another myth of Wehrmacht superiority died quietly in the mud. By late 1944, the Wehrmacht's intelligence reports had grown desperate. They'd captured American rifles, examined them, tested them, even fired them, and what they found made little sense. How could these mass-produced weapons, stamped out by the millions in factories across the United States, rival the craftsmanship of German Mausers, built by expert gunsmiths with decades of tradition? The answer lay not just in design but in philosophy. The German approach to weaponry was artisanal. Every rifle was a piece of mechanical art. Machined steel, hand-fitted bolts, polished chambers. Each unit unique, each scope adjusted by hand. But America thought like an engineer. They didn't build rifles one by one, they built systems. Every part, every spring, every screw was manufactured to exact tolerances, then replicated thousands of times over. Precision wasn't something to be earned through craftsmanship, it was something to be scaled. That's how rifles like the M1 Garand and the Springfield, M1903-4 could be churned out by the hundreds of thousands and still hit center mass at 800 yards. The M1's secret weapon was its gas-operated system. Instead of cycling the bolt manually, it used a portion of the expanding gas from each shot to reload automatically, a mechanism that reduced recoil and allowed the shooter to stay on target. It meant a soldier could deliver accurate follow-up shots faster than any bolt-action rifle on Earth. To a sniper, that was revolutionary. Meanwhile, the Springfield 1903-4 evolved into a marksman's dream. Its long barrel provided balance. Its .30-06 round flew flatter and farther than the German 7.92 mm Mauser. At 600 yards, the Springfield still carried lethal velocity, while the Mauser's bullet had begun to drop. At 800 yards, a Springfield round could penetrate a German steel helmet, and behind that bullet was a new kind of science. U.S. ballistics labs had begun testing drag coefficients, air density, barrel harmonics details the Germans dismissed as unnecessary. Every bullet that left an American rifle wasn't just lead and copper, it was data in motion. This was the quiet revolution of World War II. Not just the race for tanks or bombers or rockets, but for precision itself. The Germans built perfect rifles for perfect shooters. The Americans built perfectly consistent rifles for every shooter. And that was the difference between an elite army and a modern one. By the fall of 1944, that difference was starting to show. The Hürtgen forest, late 1944. To anyone who fought there, the name alone brings back the smell of wet pine and death. It was cold, dark, and endless, a nightmare of fog and mud where visibility rarely exceeded 50 yards. For the German army, it was the ideal ground for defense. For the Americans, it was hell. Snipers thrived in the Hürtgen, hidden in trees, behind shattered trunks, under fallen logs. Every step the Americans took was a gamble. But this time, the Germans weren't the only ghosts in the woods. American marksmen, equipped with their new rifles, began turning the tide in the most unlikely of places. Sergeant Paul Hale of the 4th Infantry Division recalled, "You could tell where the German snipers were by where our boys stopped moving. So we'd backtrack, take position, and wait. It was like chess, except the loser didn't get another turn." Hale's team, armed with Springfield, a 4S, and Garands with telescopic sights, hunted snipers the way snipers once hunted them. They fired fewer rounds, but everyone counted. The Germans were baffled. A sniper could change position, crawl to a new hide, and still get picked off minutes later from hundreds of yards away, through cover he thought was impenetrable. They began calling these unseen American shooters the Quiet Thunder. And soon, that quiet thunder rolled eastward into Belgium and into history. December 1944. The snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. The Germans launched their last great counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge. Chaos, fog, and confusion blanketed the front. But within that chaos, American riflemen held their lines with a level of marksmanship the Wehrmacht hadn't thought possible. In Bastogne, Malmedy, and countless unnamed ridges, M1 Garand spat fire through the cold. Snipers with Springfield A4S provided overwatch from church towers and frozen hillsides, eliminating German officers and machine gunners with surgical precision. For the first time, German infantry reported being pinned down not by artillery, but by accurate rifle fire. One captured German officer confessed under interrogation. "We used to say, Americans only knew how to spray bullets. Now, we fear the ones who fire just once." The Americans had mastered something the Germans never anticipated: the fusion of mass and mastery. Where Germany had built an army of specialists, the United States had built an army where every man could be dangerous. By the time the snows melted in 1945, the German sniper, once the terror of Europe, was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. The war in Europe was nearing its end. In the spring of 1945, the once feared German war machine was collapsing. Cities lay in ruins, factories silent, and the master snipers who had haunted Allied lines were now prisoners of war, gaunt, exhausted, and disillusioned. Among the captured weapons the Allies examined were the legendary Kar-9 8K Mauser sniper rifles. Finely machined, beautifully balanced the pride of German craftsmanship, but when compared side by side with the American M1 903A4 and M1C Garand sniper variants, the verdict surprised even the most devoted German gunsmiths. The Mauser was a masterpiece, but it was a masterpiece of another era. It represented precision that could be built only by hand, one rifle at a time. The American rifles represented something else entirely: precision built by industry. The Germans had to admit this was the future. After the war, Allied technical teams pored over captured German weapons, but the Germans, too, studied the American arsenal. In 1946, a secret report from the former Mauser factory engineers made an astonishing statement. The M1 Garand combines accuracy and rate of fire to a degree we thought impossible. Its production tolerances are consistent at a scale beyond our own capacity. We underestimated America's ability to mass-produce precision. To them, it was a revelation that a rifle designed not for elite shooters, but for every soldier could perform with such deadly accuracy, even under the brutal conditions of war. When German snipers were interrogated by Allied intelligence, their testimonies told the same story. "We thought only Germans could make rifles that perfect." "Perfect," one former sniper admitted. "Then we saw how many of yours could shoot that well, and we realized Germany was doomed." For the first time, the concept of industrial precision, the idea that technology and repetition could replace artisanal perfection, had proven its worth, not just in factories, but on the battlefield. The Americans hadn't just outgunned Germany, they had out-engineered them. Their rifles symbolized a shift in philosophy. Where Germany saw warfare as a contest of skill, America saw it as a test of systems. The M1 Garand was the embodiment of that system, a weapon reliable in mud, sand, snow, or rain. A rifle that could be repaired in minutes, its parts interchangeable across millions of units. And yet, it didn't sacrifice precision for mass production. In fact, it thrived on it. Every American rifleman became a potential marksman. Every squad carried within it the seeds of sniper-level accuracy. And that changed the very nature of infantry warfare. Even the Soviets watching closely took notes. Their later rifles, like the SKS and the iconic AK-47, borrowed heavily from the Garand's operating system. The British adapted lessons from the Springfield into their post-war sniper programs. Even post-war Germany, when rebuilding its army under NATO, sought rifles that blended German craftsmanship with American scalability. The legacy of the American rifles extended far beyond World War II. The M1 Garand continued to serve through Korea, where its semi-automatic power proved decisive in the freezing mountains. The Springfield M1903A4 evolved into the M40 sniper rifle, still used in spirit by Marine snipers generations later. Each weapon told the same story that precision and mass production were no longer enemies. They could coexist, and when combined, they could change the outcome of wars. A generation of American engineers and gunsmiths had done what few thought possible. They had made accuracy democratic. No longer was marksmanship reserved for the elite few. It was a standard expectation of every man carrying a U.S. rifle. In 1947, at a weapons exhibition in occupied Germany, an American colonel handed a Garand rifle to a former Wehrmacht sniper. The German weighed it carefully, tested the trigger, and fired a single shot downrange. The round struck dead center. He nodded silently, then turned to the colonel and said, "If every man in your army can shoot like that, then we never had a chance." The colonel only smiled. That was the idea. The war ended not with one great duel, but with 1,000 small ones scattered across the forests, the fields, and the ruins of Europe. Each shot fired was not just a contest of aim, but of ideology, a clash between two ways of thinking. The Germans believed perfection came from mastery, from the hand of the craftsman, from discipline, from art. The Americans believed perfection could be built, replicated, improved, shared, and shipped by the thousands. And in the end, that made all the difference. The legendary German snipers, once the unseen ghosts of the battlefield, found themselves outmatched not by better men, but by a better system. Their precision, their patience, their legendary Mausers all fell before the relentless tide of rifles that were, each and every one, good enough to kill with a single shot. The Americans hadn't reinvented the sniper, they had reinvented the rifleman. When you look at the battlefields today, the rusting helmets buried in the mud, the forgotten cartridges beneath the moss, it's easy to forget that these were once the front lines of a revolution, not just in tactics or courage, but in technology. Every M1 Garand, every Springfield, a 4, told the same quiet truth. That precision doesn't have to be rare. That greatness, when shared, becomes unstoppable. The Germans once laughed at the idea that a mass-produced rifle could ever compete with a Mauser. But when the forests of Europe fell silent, and their best marksmen lay dead by American bullets, that laughter stopped. As one German prisoner later put it, "We were the hunters, but then the Americans started hunting us." And maybe that's the lasting lesson of the rifle and of war itself. Victory doesn't always belong to the strongest, or even the most skilled. Sometimes, it belongs to those who learn fastest, who adapt, who build, and who refuse to believe that good enough can't also be great. Because when the factories of America turned out rifles by the millions, rifles that fired true in any man's hands, they didn't just arm an army. They armed an idea that precision could be mass-produced, that democracy could be engineered, and that even on the battlefield, equality could fire back. The camera pans over the misty forests of Hürtgen, the fields of Normandy, and the snow-covered hills of the Ardennes. Abandoned helmets, shattered rifles, the ghosts of two armies that once fought for the soul of the modern world. Then, a single rifle shot echoes crisp, distant, final. Fade to black. You thought you were the hunter. But today, we're the ones doing the hunting.